Welcome to this podcast, Holistic Creators, where we share our unique and universal stories about shaping the future for the 4 Ps: people, planet, purpose, and profit. My name is Swanet Kunze. I'm a mental coach and your host of this show. My intention for this show is to inspire you on your path to a holistic future. So welcome. Hello and welcome to my podcast, Holistic Creators. My name is Swanet and I'm your host. Today, my guest is Mary Collins. She is a multimedia journalist and hypnotherapist. So welcome to my show, Mary.
Thank you very much for having me on today. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, so I'm curious. You are coming from the media and now I'm a hypnotherapist. Tell me a little bit about your story. What has triggered you to do this change and what have you done before? Share a little bit about that.
Sure, thank you. For me, this is really interesting. I'm new at being the one who's being interviewed, except for when I'm a panelist. But pretty much from when I was very young, I ended up being accepted to a school from actually what they would call an elementary stage into high school for my writing skills. And so I didn't want to be a journalist, but funny enough, I studied biology and communications on the hopes to do something wonderful and meaningful, like be a veterinarian. However, that is not the way life took me. I ended up always falling back into what I knew, and that was the ability for storytelling and being creative. And so I had my children quite young, and during that time, I focused I focused intently on them, and realized that there was really a need, especially because our family was moving constantly. Every 5 years, my husband was kind of picking us up and saying, hey, we've got to move on because I need to evolve in my job title, sort of thing. So I found that I'd given up the journalism, I'd given up everything, and then I sort of stayed at home for a little bit and realized when we got to the Caribbean that there was a lack of children's programs for children in the Caribbean that focused on their environment. So I set to work and created, with my au pair actually, a children's program. And all of those resources I had from when I was younger came to play again. And we created this wonderful program that was teaching about sustainability, about taking care of the environment, about the importance of becoming part of the culture and cultural immersion. And yeah, I did, I was just doing this for my own children at the time. And once again, we moved and I kind of took a break for a little bit. I had suffered at that point. I was doing a lot of carrying cameras around, helping the crew, and the running around created a problem with my back. And so I ended up having a disc herniation. And so that was my first lovely experience with health problems. And then from there, I got a back operation, and then I took a break for a little bit, and then I got pulled back into media again, doing photography for fashion shows. And then we traveled again, got back to the US, and ended up writing and working for PBS and helping produce children's programs again, and also working with wonderful, PBS is a public broadcasting network. And it was something that I always wanted to do. Sesame Street was my inspiration for my own children's program. So it was a joy to give back to the community by helping create programs based on education, the environment, the culture, sustainability, everything. So from there, we traveled again, and I am now in Switzerland, and this time I'm hoping we're going to stay. So I work between here and France, and what got me into the hypnotherapy is because during this time I ended up having another fall and causing more damage to my spine. So I had another surgery. And this time I found that I also started to gain weight. I started to have problems with my eyesight. And I thought, oh goodness, what's happening here? And it turned out that I have autoimmune disorder, which I guess my mother, who was a nurse, probably knew about, but the older generation simply didn't discuss these things. So when my blood sugars would drop, she would just give me powdered sugar. Or, if I had any conditions, she would just be like, sit down for a second and deal with it. And so I don't know if it was the American diet that got me kind of back into eating unhealthily. And then I got Hashimoto's. So my thyroid stopped working and everything just went into complete chaos. So that's when I took a break for a little bit. And during that break time, I had hypnotherapy in Ireland where my family is from. And I thought it was so weird how it took me from something that a subject that was about overeating candy at certain times of the year, and it turned out to be connected to my mom and my father. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's crazy how the brain just pulls these images up. I was very interested. So then when I fell ill, I finished up my contract. Actually, before I left to Switzerland, I finished up my contract with PBS, and I studied intently hypnotherapy. I went to a school and I did proper training. There's lots of people that do 4-day training. No. I did a 3-month, 9 to 5 thorough training, got offered a partnership because I guess I was good at it, because as a journalist, you are creating something you're making a story. So, but then we moved. So while I was there, I had a client, one that really made me feel inspired to continue with hypnotherapy. He was a young man. He had a brain aneurysm, and I watched with his parents as he just kind of went downhill. And so he had many wonderful therapists. He had many wonderful doctors, but he got to a stage where even with nausea medication, he couldn't keep his food down. And he went down to 60 kilo. He couldn't really talk properly, couldn't walk very well. And he was a friend of my daughter's, so I thought, I have to do something. So I said to them, I'm only a new hypnotherapist, but can I help? And they said, anything. Because when you have a child that's ill, you will do anything. So I gave him free sessions. And after about 2 weeks, I used to do some things I was practicing. So when he was under hypnosis, I'd be like, the rain in Spain falls mostly on the plain. And he would say it. And I was just fascinated how he could say things quite clearly with his subconscious when he was in a sleep or a trance state. But then when he was out of it, he wasn't as able to speak. So anyway, after about 2 weeks, it was the children's graduation, their high school graduation, and they decided to let him walk, even though he hadn't officially graduated. And I was just standing there talking to the parents, not really thinking anything about it. And his grandmother came over and she hugged me with tears. And she said, thank you so much. You have made such a difference in my grandson's life. And I was like, no, I haven't. He's had a team of doctors and specialists and therapists. I alone haven't done this. But she said, yes, but whatever you've done with his subconscious, it has really made a difference. And from there, it made me feel different. You know, when you produce something for children's television or television in general, no matter what your creation is, it gets edited, it gets shaped. And generally, because it's money-making, you know, television is money-making, it gets shaped into the ideas of whoever owns the program. And so I saw a lot of really great programs that I had helped work on become commercials for banks or commercials for something. And I thought, you know, this is manipulation, and it didn't really sit well with me. So when I left the industry, I was a bit heartbroken, but at the same time, I was like, what difference was I really making? Ultimately, you know, I couldn't see the differences that I was making because it was going out to the public. And with this, I saw the difference that I'd made in this kid's life. And he's gone on to be a publisher. He's a public speaker. He is an assistant director at a university in a department. And so all these things were happening and my life was continuing, and I was just trying to work on my own health. And actually his sister had reached out to me and said, why have you stopped? You're so good at this. And then his mom wrote me a letter and I was like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. Maybe I should start again. So I re-educated myself under the UK hypnotherapy kind of standards as well. And so from there, I just decided I'm going to keep doing this, you know, and I still get pulled in because then when I got to Switzerland, they pulled me into the radio station and then I ended up with my own radio show. But I still feel I have been for just last year, really, that I said, that's it. I'm really going to focus. And I put the radio station on hold and said, look, I want to do this because I can see the difference that I make. And I wish I'd had this when I was younger because my mom passed away from cancer. And I wish I could have told her what I needed to her subconscious when she was in, you know, that kind of semi-coma, how to just let go, how to release the pain, how to, you know, just make the condition a little bit better. And so I actually give free therapy to people who have cancer because to me, that's like my most important thing, to help them with the nausea, to help them with the pain, to help them with the anxiety is just so important to me. So that's kind of how I probably have gone back and forth of time slots, but pretty much it's a shame what I'm doing now. You're very intuitive, and I actually create intuitive retreats because that is exactly the point. We don't listen to our gut, and we end up messing around and doing things that we're not necessarily inclined to do. But storytelling has always been my ability, my gift, being creative and finding ways to help people out of a situation. So I think I haven't really changed that much because that's what the media do. They hypnotize you. So.
Yeah, wow. What an interesting story. Absolutely, yes. And I can see that, of course, the media is hypnotizing people with the content, and a lot of this information goes into the subconscious mind, which you can enter with your hypnotherapy.
Yes.
I'm curious, what do you see at the moment that is happening as we go deeper into content that is even not produced by humans anymore, but for example, by artificial intelligence with whatever intention?
Right.
And people are wearing this kind of glasses. I don't want to use a name for that, but you see that this goes directly into the subconscious mind and is programming people in a certain kind of way. Do you think that, or can you see that there has been like a change or transformation from where you started until now? Like we all know Sesame Street, of course, and like being children, we learned a lot of that, how the world is functioning, but of course we were also programmed somehow.
Yes.
And now using artificial intelligence to, yeah, be part of our social media content or TV content, or yeah, using this, and what was the transformation you can see?
Well, first of all, people think that they're not hypnotizable. And people think that it's something that's like heebie-jeebie and it's not science. It's 100% science. If we went to go back to the Pavlov experiment with getting a dog to salivate every time you ring a bell because it knows it's going to be fed, they've known this forever. They've known this even back to Victor Hugo has done hypnosis in his book about Notre Dame and on the Quasimodo. He starts to tell a story, gets you emotionally connected to the characters, will go forward in time, then put in a political statement, and then bring you back to the characters. So the way hypnosis works and the way media uses it, it surpasses critical thinking. And the majority of us don't realize, but we don't use a lot of our critical thinking skills on a day-to-day basis because the body and the mind are connected in such a way that over 80% of you is run on automatic. So you're breathing, you're talking, you're listening to things, you're multitasking. This is literally your neurotransmitters going off and doing things that they are used to. And it's only when you're learning a new skill that you start to like maybe use critical thinking or you use emotional thinking. So what happens with media is that they show you something beautiful and they connect it to their product. And then they have lots of bells and whistles because it only takes 12 pieces of information to put someone into a trance. 12 pieces. So I would just have to say, feel the seat below you, feel the air temperature, the light that's coming in through the window, use a certain tone, use a certain rhythm, and put a person into hypnosis. Or a semi-hypnotic trance. So the way media does this, unfortunately, is that, as I said, they connect their products to your emotions so that you feel like, well, that beautiful person, wears this perfume. So I am going to be beautiful if I wear this perfume. And so it's an interesting thing because it surpasses completely critical thinking of perfume is not going to make my life any different. But it does influence the ego. So the ego thinks, well, but I've bought it. And immediately you start to look different. You hold yourself differently. I have favorite boots like that. I put my boots on, I feel an inch higher. And all of a sudden I'm like, I am warrior princess. Exactly. I can do anything. And we do need these things. We do need these anchors to help us on days that we don't feel bad. And sometimes I don't like to, but sometimes I will tell a person, okay, well, use this anchor to help you. Not to make it an addictive or a habit, but unfortunately, we are spending so much of our time being hooked on our emotional anchors that are really not connected into helping us in any way, because marketers don't care about you. You're a mass, you're just a product. And that includes the news. And that's what's quite worrying when you talk about what's happening. Now we have things like deep fake. before we had deepfake, we had the media going down the kind of scripted material. And it was no longer about investigative journalism. It was no longer about, I'm going to be truthful because I care about my community. It became bought out by big companies, and the big companies have a motive. So, fear is one of those ways to get into people and break their psyche. One of the first things I ask clients is, what are you watching on television? Are you watching television? What kind of music are you listening to? Because all of these things are breaking into your psyche. And if you listen to some of the music, like there's one that I let's just say that it just repeats. It has a really great do like pattern, and it just says, like, I'm just going to say it. It says, let it go, let it go. And then it says, focus, fire a gun. And you're like, what? Like, if you're listening, you're like, what is it saying to whoever's listening to this? What kind of mind control, as crazy as it sounds, is it really intended on? And the way they do that is that they put in something rhythmatic, and then they put in like a few words that are kind of like easy to go along with, and then they put in a command. So when it comes to deep fake and AI, once again, very dangerous, because people say, well, AI is better because it's not racist and it's not bigoted and it doesn't pass judgment. Of course it does, because it has to be programmed by a human. So, this idea now, at the same time, as a hypnotherapist, I am myself talking more and more about tech. I had given out 1,000 warnings about, please don't let tech write your websites. Please don't let tech do everything for you. And I try my best to not blog with AI or do any of these things, because I feel like, especially therapists, I warn them. I'm like, listen, if you have the AI do everything for you, when you're actually interviewed or when you're speaking to your client, they're going to know it's not you, or they're not going to be happy. It's like catfishing, where they think it's a super intelligent therapist, and then the person doesn't have and that's the thing. People are like, well, why don't you write scripts and keep them? And I'm like, nope, I have to see the client. I have to feel what they need, and then I will just flow. And they're like, well, I can't do that as a therapist. Then maybe you shouldn't be a hypnotherapist. That's my opinion, unless the person has something to complement it, like a really soothing voice or caring nature. There has to be something. A person shouldn't be a doctor if they don't care about human beings. That's my opinion, but it's a strong motivation. And so now you're talking about AI. AI can be used for some things, which I can get into if you'd like. But of course, everything that starts off as a good cause, does it end up that way? Maybe if we had more supply of a demand of, I want to be healthy, I want to be in control of my life, and people used critical thinking, then maybe AI could be controlled for the benefit of mankind. But how many people are just letting their 5-year-olds get on social media?
Yeah, I think that what you said, that there's a certain kind of frequency that comes with AI, and you can read it in the text, or you can see it when it is creating videos, or at the moment still you can, from my point of view, because if a human is speaking, you can feel, or I can feel the energy that comes with it and the frequency that comes with it. But AI is not transporting this. It's kind of still clean in that. So do you think that people also become disconnected from themselves, from nature, from their own emotions, if they, for example, listen to media that is created by artificial intelligence? What is your opinion on that?
100%. 100%, not only just because of AI, but scripts that are mass produced or produced for all of the different agencies. There's already been studies that show that, for instance, social media. So the idea is that we're social creatures, right? We need to have company of others. However, if you go over, I think 280 something, someone will probably correct me and tell me the right number here, but once you go over a certain amount of social people, you have too many friends, you actually feel more lonely. So, and something that's quite intriguing to me, that it's the same, like if you hear a party going on, but you're not part of the party, you get exhausted listening to other people party. So where I'm located right now, there's been a 3-day party. And when I was in it, I had all the energy in the world. But the minute I stepped away from it, it annoyed me. It annoyed me and I felt exhausted. So imagine if you're in a situation where everyone looks beautiful, everyone's on vacation, everyone is having fun. Or if they're just hanging out with each other, but it's in a different place and you're not really being included. And this is actually leading to a lot more cyberbullying, which is so very sneaky in a way, because kids in the old days, we used to be able to just get away from the bully and go home and have a minute to ourselves, brooding about it or just getting over it. Now, these kids have to tap dance for social media. And if they don't get a like, they feel it. They feel it like it's been a punch in their chest physically, because our psyche is connected to fight or flight, to belong or to be excluded. And in our ancestry, if we were excluded, it meant death. It meant certain death. So this idea of like, well, I only have 12 likes, nobody loves me. This is a very dangerous game that we're playing, not just with children, but with adults who are trying to circumvent the world. You know, like I was talking today about growing pains and how it's like, I'm still feeling them. This is not something that we experience only in adolescence. You know, as we become older, we still have to like figure out where we belong socially, who we are, and how to survive in our work. So I do think it's dangerous, and I know myself that even my voice is going to be replaced, and everything is being replaced. People are getting AI to create scripts. Everything is being replaced. However, the idea now is to how do we, first of all, disconnect to the caring of that, and at the same time survive it. Like, how can we grow with what's going to happen inevitably, unfortunately?
For me, it feels at the moment that there will be like two paths people decide to go on. The ones that are totally into this technocratic path, that are fine with using all the new tools and are willing to step deeper into the system. And the ones that on the other path, this is more like I call it the magical one, where they start to reconnecting to people in person, where they try to create communities. Here where I'm living in Madeira Island, we see that a lot of people coming here to create permaculture projects like this, eco villages. So this is really stepping back into nature, stepping back into deep connections and supporting each other. And of course, we use technology as we are now speak via Zoom, for example, but it is still this one way and the other, and there's nothing kind of in between what I'm experiencing.
Right.
So, what do you think about this kind of future vision that comes with either using technology or being more in nature, or do you think that there's something in between?
I think that there can be something in between. I mean, for example, when I do the tech talks, one of the things that fascinates me is that the ability, well, whether we like it or not, there are things like Messenger, WhatsApp, Facebook, who already are using remote viewing with us, right? So when we sign that big contract that says, I accept all these terms, a lot of people don't realize that one of the terms is that they can monitor what you're writing, how you're speaking, they take pictures of you, everything. And there are people who will say, well, what can you do? There's nothing you can do. This is just the modern world. And I am one of those people that fights against that as much as possible. I mean, the minute that they start using digital IDs to get into my supermarket is the minute that I lose weight, because I don't want to do that. You know, I think that there should be a separation of human rights and autonomy to having to do something like a cat, like a piece of cattle, you know, like an animal. However, I think you can integrate it because, for example, with the remote control viewing, as scary as that is, there are some things that they're using it for that can help pre-diagnose dementia because of your type strokes when you're typing. They can look into a person's pupil now, in their right pupil, and tell if the person has autism. That is amazing. And that apparently they're saying is because of AI. Personally, I think it's because some scientist has done this and used AI somehow to help, artificial intelligence to help with this. But there are many advances that could happen where we could end up giving people eyesight, where we could help people who have lost a limb, where even with therapy, I'm working towards something called exposure therapy. And it's actually where we take a soldier an ex-soldier, a veteran, and put them through a video-like game sequence that kind of gets them in a situation where they have the therapist in their ear sort of saying to them, listen, you're okay. This is okay. Now observe what's around you, to get them through a trauma that they have done, because all of our memories are false memories. Starting from the very beginning, even if we have an intense memory, our brain will rewire it and kind of sort of change some of the aspects of it. And I don't necessarily agree that we should take people back into trauma, but they're finding some techniques with this exposure therapy that is helping people. So that's an idea where virtual reality could make a big difference. Taking people through, there's an augmented reality one that was created at the University of Basel here, where you have your phone, and if you're afraid of spiders, and it puts a spider on your table in front of you. And it's, it's a cartoon spider, but it's still a spider. So it kind of runs at you, and then it asks you, what level do you want now? Do you want scary level, or do you want okay level? And you can watch this thing on your actual countertop moving towards you. But what that does, that's exposure therapy, is it kind of gives you the situation where what your mind was imagining, which will always be extreme, to what is kind of in between, becomes a bit more acceptable. And it gives you a moment to breathe and be like, hey, I can do this. And they found that because you have rewired your neurotransmitters to accepting that I'm going to be okay when something runs up to me really quickly. I'm going to be okay when I hear a loud sound. I'm going to be okay when I get in an elevator and go up 20 floors, because you've exposed the person to that therapy. So VR could be very useful. And I do think it's going to be very interesting on the way it's going, where we are going to see more and more, and I don't think this is healthy, but situations where people will live in a VR world. They will. And I actually wrote a script about this in 2000, and I should have finished it, but it was where people are going to have to be buzzed to stay on the street properly, because they're going to be in this VR world, and they're not going to really know the difference between reality and, virtual reality. And that is a scary aspect of it. It's like everything, where humans go too far. And like you said, I think when humans start to go too far, there will be people who will say, enough, I'm done. I just hope at that time they will be able to pull back, because the way things are progressing, I interviewed Dr. Moran Cerf. They are now doing more predictive programming, and that's really scary. And when I was working, I went to one of the children's conferences, and they were talking about observing children blinking, and they would know whether or not the child was in a trance because of how many times they blinked. And you can observe this when you watch the news or you watch any celebrities. You can see that if they're not blinking and they're kind of like that when they're talking, they are in a hypnotic state. So once again, it's human beings need to start saying to themselves, do I want to use hypnosis for myself? Do I want to use tech for the well-being of myself and my community? Or am I going to allow it to control me? And that is a serious conversation people need to have. There needs to be laws put in place about who is programming these AI modules and what they're being used for. Therapy, great. Anything else? That's a scary bit, because it is going to get more and more realistic. There are already now virtual reality and AI models. They're not real, and they use someone's voice, and they have these things like they have a real life. And our age, we have more sense. Like, we can look at that and say that's not real. But then if you think about it, someone who's just lost a loved one, they might want to see their loved one again. And what do you do in that situation? Do you allow them time to say the things they had to say to the person who's virtually there? Or do you just let it go and then they become obsessed with this non-real person? It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. The pandemic caused a lot of loneliness too. So, if there's going to be more of those, what do we do? Do we allow people to be completely alone, or do we allow them some sort of interaction, even though it's virtual?
I think it is with every tool. Like, you can have a knife to kill someone, or you can use it to cut bread and share it. Correct. And so I think it's the same with AI. I'm not totally against it or for it. No, it's just like being aware where it is used and how it is used, and being responsible to allow something or not.
Exactly.
But what I see is that in my age, we are growing up like playing on the street.
Mhm.
Like, no, we had like accidents, falling down by skating or whatever. So we had real life experiences.
Mhm.
But for the children I'm seeing now, and this is even when I go into a restaurant, I see that the parents give the children something like a screen to play with or to look at. So they grow up into this virtual reality already. So how do they know if something is real? Because virtual reality is real for them at that age, and they are programmed in very early ages.
Yep.
Or if something is like what we would call the real world where we are living in. So I think that this kind of two realities come together for the children. And as you said, there's no, what is the English word, distinction, separation
Yeah,
between that anymore. So for them, it is both real. So why would they go into the real world, like
that's hard.
playing in nature where it is dangerous and not sitting in their chair having this glasses on?
Right. Well, exactly. And that's why it's important for people like us to talk about the differences and what the health concerns are. I mean, there are health concerns. The attention span in people has gone down even further, where it is now below the attention span of a goldfish. Memory, the ability to remember anything, has gone down. The right part of the brain is now is starting to become less empathetic. And there are studies that are showing that that could be because of the constant electronic radiation sort of stimulation that's causing that. So we're going to have people that are less empathetic, people who are more impatient, with less attention span and inability to remember things. And these are things that people will say, no, that's not connected, not to mention the social behavior of people. There are people on TikTok throwing their babies across the room because it's a trend. Yeah, there's some terrible things that are happening. There's a woman that's just recently been arrested because she was a parenting mom. She was an advisor for parenting, and she was actually abusing her children. It's crazy. I mean, it's actually crazy that it's become so captivating, but we need to look behind why it's become captivating to be on social media all the time. And it's because we are programmed to want to know, to survive. And unfortunately, it just depends on what we're being given. So in China, they don't allow just anything on TikTok. They allow science projects on TikTok, building for the kids to learn how to build things, to do science experiments. They put exercise on their programs, as to where in the Western world, we are doing stupid things like drinking glue and, throwing children across a room, or twerking, or something that's just, but what's happening with the human brain is that they're looking at these things, and then they're getting little bursts of dopamine because the brain is still saying, but you've learned something. Even if it is the most useless information, even if it's terribly disturbing, and that's actually more dangerous, because if it's disturbing, you get that fight flight reaction and cortisol levels increase. And the brain still wants you to figure out why that's happened. So you'll keep scrolling, hoping to find a solution. And things will just go more extreme and more extreme, because the media know that. They know that they can captivate you with a kitten up a tree and then a kitten getting eaten by an alligator. So it's an unfortunate thing, but it's all about our hormonal reactions and our neurotransmitter reactions. And unfortunately, media know that that's a way to keep you hooked. And unfortunately, it's naturally part of our human makeup to be hooked because of the dopamine and because of the cortisol. So that is one of the first things I would say, is that even as a therapist who uses things online, who is working on tech to help with exposure therapy and these different things, ultimately what I want to do is get people back to a parasympathetic state, that they can be in a relaxed and digest mode. So then they feel calm enough to step away from social media, and then they can start exploring who they are through nature, through mindfulness, through breathing exercises. And I think that's it. That's all we can do to kind of get the madness, to separate people from the madness, is sort of give them a little bit of the madness and then say, okay, but here is something that you can do alternatively to find yourself again. And that's what therapy should do. It should bring people back to their root, their gut, their instinct.
When you have people in your hypnotherapy, do you see that people that are younger now react differently on hypnotherapy than the older ones? And how is this different?
Absolutely. Teenagers and children go into hypnosis super easily, automatically almost. And they can do things like they can scratch their arm, they can look up and they can look around, and I'll know that they're completely under. They're completely under because they are constantly under. And this is one of the problems when they're around social media constantly. It is hypnotizing them all of the time. The music is hypnotizing them all of the time. So instead of the semi-trance state being used for learning a useful skill like a path home, where your body just automatically, once it's done it a few times, you don't have to think about the way you're taking, you just get there. Survival. It knows where the water supply is. It knows where the food supply is. It knows where the food is in the cupboard when they get home or whatever. That is a natural semi-hypnotic state. That's what eventually happens, because then the body is in rest. Even though it is doing something, it knows it's safe doing it. The problem with social media is it keeps clicking you. It keeps getting you to go back, and it's giving you more intense dopamine. It's giving you more intense cortisol levels. So you're constantly in an almost fight or flight. You'll find that children will sleep, deep sleeps, after they come off social media. So if a parent, try this, parents, take the phone away from the kids and watch how they just drop into a sleep for hours. And you're like, what? I mean, aren't they getting enough sleep? Their body is in this tension when they're on social media, because it's trying to absorb what it sees. And a lot of the stuff that's out there, it doesn't make any sense. So it has the brain in this kind of shock, like this deer in headlights, because it doesn't make sense to say, I love you and I love the way you make me feel, but I love the way it burns. That doesn't make sense. And it puts the brain into subconscious shock. And this is what a lot of music is doing now. It's telling these two, I mean, Billie Eilish, have you listened to her stuff? She's talking about burying her friend. I mean, it's crazy. The stuff that's going out there, parents need to be aware that a lot of stuff that's going out there, including Disney, is a lot of it is programming, and it's not a good form of programming. It's not like a be nice to your neighbor, be respectful to your teachers, explore nature and be kind to nature. It's not that, unfortunately. And why, I'm not sure, but that is the way it's going.
Yeah, and it's, for example, symbolism is used a lot. And if you see the same symbols over and over again, and then they are connected to something else, it's the same. It's the programming that the brain can't understand, but it will create a certain kind of reaction because this is what is triggered by that.
Mm-hmm. And accepting. And it's a form of desensitization, which you're finding a lot in violent media. People are like, oh, Squid Game didn't affect me. It's like, yeah, but it affected your children, because when you see someone's head being bashed in, if you don't have a reaction, something's very wrong with you. But if you have enough of that kind of behavior, that becomes normal. And that's why someone who's been in an abused situation thinks that that's actually normal. They think that the highs and lows of their adrenaline is normal. And they think that the abuse is normal because it's all that they've ever known. So we do have to be very wary of what social media is telling us. We have to use, even if it's just 10 minutes, to sit and say, what is that song saying? Why is it saying that? What might it influence me to do? The old saying is like a murder mystery of who's going to gain from this, like who done it? Well, more than likely there's some reasoning behind what you're seeing and what you're being told. And it's the same with politics. If you listen to most politicians, they have learned how to use their voice to soothe you up and down, up and down. They are literally rocking us into a hypnotic state, a trance. So absolutely. And the signs, that one annoys me too. There's a lot of signs that are happening, and I sort of point them out to certain groups and say, do you realize that means like abuse of children, and they're like, no, it doesn't. It's just pretty colors. No, 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 no. There are certain signs that we're being manipulated to believe are child friendly. They're just events. And for me, there's certain things that don't belong around children, and that's sexual things. That for me, that's grooming. If you talk about anything that has a sexual inclination behind it, it's grooming. And yeah, I think it's terrible. It is a terrible thing. There are lots of signs and symbols. I don't get me into trouble, but I don't care. That we do need to talk about, that not everything should be just accepted. We really need to start thinking of why something is being done and how is it really going to benefit a community, and more importantly, your own family and yourself. Hypnosis can be used for good and it can be used for bad. And we need to start using it for ourselves for good, to give us the motivation to do better, to feel better, and to in turn help those around us, because we've got the oxygen mask on now. We're taking care of ourselves.
And what you say about this grooming topic, I think it is also like stretching the boundaries, like, okay, just not touching the hand is nice, and now touching the face is nice, and so on and so on. And sooner or later, you are in a field where you say, this is definitely abusive. Mm-hmm. And if you have not the consent, it is definitely abusive. Mm-hmm. So how can a child agree to having sexual contact? It can't. Yeah. And if the parents don't take care of that, this is like their responsibility to set this boundary. Yeah. As I see this trend a lot, especially at the moment in the US.
Right. And it's been taken out of the parents' control as well, which is very dangerous. And speaking of the whole, the abuse of things, the idea now that children can make up their mind about their sexual preference and to take hormones, all of these things, there are studies, and it doesn't take any amount of time for a reasonable person to look at studies of suicide rates in people who have had operations altering their physical appearance. It doesn't take anything. PubMed is a proper medical organization with proper doctors and scientists who spend their lives learning about something and publishing these things. And it's very clear that there is a very high percent of people, because what we think we want to change isn't necessarily what we need to change. And what we need to change is how we think about ourselves. If you're being bullied as a person, as a child, no amount of physical change is going to make you feel any different about yourself. That person who was bullied as a child is still insecure deep down inside. I am on the autistic spectrum, and I have found ways to get over my autism by using the camera, having the camera as my vision. So that's in itself tech that has helped me overcome my kind of shyness. However, and there's nothing wrong with dressing up and doing wonderful things for, glamorizing and doing all the rest of it. But if you don't deal with the core problem of why a person feels not good enough or not in the right body or neglected or hated, if you don't find out what the core reason is, or at least help them release the core reason, they will always feel that way.
Yeah. And the core reason can be being bullied, can be like feeling not connected to the social system, especially during the so-called pandemic, where a lot of people were not allowed to have physical contact with friends, with their relatives, and could only use social media to have conversation with each other. So this was a massive influence for people, and to disconnect them, to feel isolated, and at the same time they need to handle their own situation, like being in fear of their relatives, being in fear of themselves, not knowing what will happen next, if they will lose their job, whatever. This was like a massive event of creating fear inside the population. And from there on, you can bring solution, whatever the solution is. People will say, yes, but please help me out of that. And there we go.
And we've seen it done in history many times before. Find a bad guy, find a root cause to group together and do it. and forget about what the consequences of what you're doing are. You're 100% right. And I've tried to tell people this, and they don't want to hear it. They don't want to realize that they have been duped, and that the duping was from the media using their emotions to create fear and then to create rewards for having separation. And unfortunately, societies have done this forever, even down to the Americans with their football teams and their sports teams and the intensity, different countries with their political parties. This is just a way to keep you divided and distracted. And that's unfortunate. Like you said, during the pandemic, many rules were put in place that have nothing to do with helping people. As a matter of fact, we are getting closer and closer to becoming battered chickens. And battered chickens are chickens that have had their beaks cut off. They're in a cage. They are fed in a dark place, bunged together, and the social interaction that should be there, because actually chickens have a wonderful hierarchy and they have like a social system that's pretty funny and amazing. They lose that, and they have to cut their beaks off because they become full of cortisol and super aggressive. They have shorter lives because of this. They live in terrible conditions, and perhaps this is another different episode, but we do need to consider that once again, if something is being sold to you, you need to look at the who done it and why. Why is this being sold to me? Do I really fit? This is critical thinking. And that's what I said to you, that no one is using critical thinking anymore because social media has programmed us to just swipe, 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 and just get that hit, that emotional hit, and not actually think, well, why is this a good situation? And how does it affect me? And who's in control of the situation? And it is very dangerous. And it is sad because as a therapist and actually as a twin, I love to be around people. I don't actually feel like I can do anything on my own. I feel I need the energy and I need them. I need them to I shine through other people. I love to see other people happy or benefiting or being courageous or getting out of their shell. And the pandemic has created this weird, paranoid, superficial, terrible divide within humans where everyone is like on constant high alert and fight or flight syndrome. And it's really sad. It's really sad. And I hope that with enough good people getting together and talking about how we all feel, we might actually wake up out of it.
So this is what I can see, like there was too much of this fear so that people start questioning, why did this happen? Who profits from this really? Mm-hmm. And what were the consequences for myself and for my social system, family, friends, etc. So I see more and more people being awake and understanding that there was more behind than really whatever called a deadly virus, but that there was an intention behind and that there are more steps rolled out at the moment that will bring us into this situation being the chicken in the cage.
Right.
Like, no, speak about 50-minute cities or like digital ID and all this kind of stuff. Look into that. For the people who are not into this rabbit hole, please take your time not being on social media, but do a little bit of research. This will be helpful for humanity, for everybody.
100%. And actually, that's one of the reasons I gave up my radio show, because it had started off just interviewing experts about different things. I had a lot of media friends. It was about how to be a voiceover artist, etc. And then my co-host, Eva, wonderful, wonderful Swedish lady, got me down that rabbit hole of, hey, what is this? Why have they ordered all this medicine that is end of life in 2019? And hey, what is this that doesn't make any sense with this and that? And honestly, I think that's another thing that's brought me back to therapy, because you can show people in black and white, clear as day, that something isn't right. But unfortunately, if a person is operating in a fear, a flight, fight mode, they will not listen. And so it's one of those things that a lot of people had to experience the results of being duped to finally say, oh, this isn't good enough. Maybe there's more to this. And they started to go back to listening to their intuition. I find now that instead of me telling them exact details about what's there in PubMed, what's there on the WHO and the WEF, I find that if I just get them to ground themselves and listen to themselves, the subconscious will wake up. And it will start saying, wait a minute, I need to take care of this person first and those around me. And I need to make a difference now because I have the strength and the confidence to do that. Because that's what the pandemic did. It put us in fear. And when you're in fear, you're like a child. You cannot react. You have to either stay quiet or create an illusional person and situation. And that's where you get schizophrenia, from the shattering of the mind. And that is what's happened during this pandemic. It has shattered our minds and made us, and the social media attached to that, unbelievable. The control that has been given away is really terrible. And so people are living in this virtual fantasy without VR, without even having headsets. We're living this virtual, oh, everything is kittens and puppies. Because that's safe. That's a safe place. And so I think that really and truly, if they're a therapist, listen to me. It's time to wake people up and get them back to their roots, to their intuition, to their gut instinct. Because, all the most neurotransmitters are in our gut. And back in the day, the Egyptians didn't even believe in a brain. The brain was the stomach. It was the gut. And there's something to be said for that, because then you hear about people say, well, there's butterflies in my stomach, or, the hairs on the back of my neck are standing up and my stomach hurts. It's because the stomach is actually quite sensitive to what's going on around, because all of the nerves, the hairs on our skin, they even say that the extension of our hair is almost like antennae. They pick up vibrations to the atmosphere and to what's going on. So it's just that we've been fooled. We're duped constantly with the social media and the kind of distractions. And so we're not listening to our bodies. We're not listening to the environment, and we're not connecting to ourselves. And so that has to happen. And it does happen through speaking to the right people. I feel like there is an energy that connects the right people. So if someone is around bad people and feels like the situation is constantly bringing them down, then they need to just say, okay, I'm ready to find my people, and they will. I think that's important.
Yeah, so I totally agree with what you're saying. And if people now are interested, who are the right people for you to help them?
Really, I had a conversation with a friend today. It says, I don't need guided meditation. Everything in my life is wonderful. And I said to her, it's not just when you're feeling down that you need some sort of intuitive healing. Sometimes even when you're feeling great, it doesn't mean that you're being great to your loved ones. Sometimes when we feel great, we're being narcissistic. And I know people are not going to like this when I say that being narcissistic isn't terrible. Teenagers are narcissists. They have to be. It's how they grow up and survive. They're completely into themselves. But I think that with intuitive healing, you can be at your best and still need to learn how to calm down. I'm one of those people, right? I need to learn how to calm down sometimes. Generally, I help people that are in that stage of where am I? What should I be doing? I do an intuitive healing retreat where I created with Becky Hemsley, a very talented poet, an entire journal. I don't think you can see it because I've got my background on. Nope. I'll have to post that somewhere. But an entire journal that uses poems that help people from anger, grief, and just connecting with nature. And when I give online sessions, I help people with anxiety, with stress. Ultimately, what I'm doing is that I'm, as I said, just getting them to listen to themselves, taking a moment and giving their subconscious my voice, and it responds. I don't have to go down the rabbit hole of their trauma. I don't have to know what happened to them. And that can be quite dangerous. And I would say that with hypnosis, you should always be very careful about listening to an audio that is promising money relief and success and all the rest of it. If you have any kind of trauma from childhood, here's an example. I was listening to a certain person who sells audios that she's not there. She's not online ready to say to you, wake up, or, she doesn't even give you a warning that says, if you've experienced any kind of emotional issues, please immediately come out of this and breathe easily. Nothing. She just sort of says, go back 10 years, go back another 10 years, go back another 10 years. And I was sitting there and my brain, which I thought was quite awake, was going back 10 years and going back 10 years, because I tend to give things away for free because I just want to help people, right? So mine was about money and trying to get there. And I went back to the trauma of being a baby and looking at my mother and obviously it wasn't my direct memory. It was an interpretation of my memory. But just looking at everyone's face and thinking, why isn't anyone cooing me? Why isn't anyone smiling? Why is everyone so sad? And then this horrible pain hit me that I realized that my twin had died, that he wasn't there. And let me tell you, I ended up taking an aspirin for 3 months every time I went to bed because I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I had connected my bedroom to the trauma, and I had had someone come into the room and have to shake me for 10 minutes, ready to call the police or call an ambulance because I had gone into such a state of shock and bawling and crying. And for 3 months, I would cry randomly because it was something that was never dealt with. However, I should have had a therapist to bring me out of it, to calm my system down and to help me with the memory that had just cropped up suddenly. And I didn't. And so I would say, please really do the research of any therapist that you're using. Find out if they're going to do past life regression or any kind of regression. Hypnosis was banned from courts like in the 1980s or 1990s, maybe even earlier, because leading the witness would happen when the person was under hypnosis, right? So if you suggest there's someone in the room when they're talking about something, you literally create a false memory. And so a good therapist, I will use this exposure therapy with things that are like a fear, like spiders, going through but you have to be very careful to say things like, well, who is that person in the room with you or anything like that. And really a good hypnotherapist doesn't even need to really bring you back into regression for trauma because the subconscious will release what it needs to when it needs to. You just need to bring them into a state of calm, grounding, and connect them symbolically with nature because nature is like us. If you look at the lungs of a human, it's a tree. Trees don't move, and yet they reach hundreds of miles underground and connect to everything else around them. A tree knows when the winter is coming, and it knows how to self-care, yet it has no brain. So I feel that for me, anyone can come to me, but I feel that ultimately what you're going to get from me is a reconnection to yourself. And once yourself is ready to either ready to talk about what it wants or ready to just let go of it, that's what good therapy is. Not a constant client that has to come back for years and years. A good therapist is able to help that person develop enough that they can start doing things for themselves and get through things. So I am doing a couple retreats coming up, April the 27th to May the 4th and May the 10th to the 17th in Ibiza, which I've not been to. So I'm kind of excited about that one. And one in France, in the south of France by the Spanish border on the Mediterranean side. These are very exclusive retreats. They're not expensive actually, but they are very small groups because that's the point. And it's an intuitive healing retreat. So it is about a little bit of experiencing culture, because my idea is that if you take yourself into a different environment, you can develop that confident, outgoing, exciting, more, daring person, while at the same time working on your intuition and your grounding and your focus. So the one coming up in France will have another therapist, Stuart Robertson, who is an ex-police officer and has been dealing with trauma, people with trauma for a very long time. He himself with post-traumatic stress disorder, he has dealt with people like that. He deals with people that have had addictions. And so he will be doing a workbook that helps, once I help them with the now what, like this is who I am, this is what I'm feeling, the workbook that, what do I do with this? And what's most important and what can I prioritize versus, my second idea job or my second person or my relationships or whatever it is. He kind of helps people with the workbook that will continue on. So that's what I'm working at the minute, are those two intuitive healing retreats, as well as, of course, online group sessions and online therapy sessions privately.
So, and where can people connect with you? Do you have a website or are you on social media?
Sure, I know. I really hate, I've done a couple of these kind of like Instagram where you talk into the camera, and when I say to you, I just want to make a silly face because I hate it. So I can't see who I'm talking to, and I don't like that, because then it feels like, eh. So I've a couple of times in a kind of impassioned moment, I've put up a video and I mean it. So I guess it comes across, but I can't do the whole every week create a video thing. But I am on time, the number for change.info. I don't know if you can see the thing behind me, but it's time for change.info. And you can see where a person can book a session. Also, therapists can book a tech session to help them with their audio. Because for me, when I listen to a guided meditation or anything like that, I have to like the voice, and everything just has to be perfect because I'm very audio. But I also talk about how people who have aphantasia and things like this, who aren't very visual, how we can use tech with that and other things. So I do a couple of those things, the retreats, the online sessions, and tech help for anyone who wants practice with their therapy to create audio on Time for Change.
Okay, so I will also put this link and your social media links in the show notes so that people can just click on that and find the way to you.
Thank you so much.
Last but not least, is there anything that you would like to share that I didn't ask you?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, I'm a therapist, right? And I'm a journalist. And so the idea that people think that, well, therapists don't have problems, journalists are amazing, blah, blah, blah. The truth is we all have our highs and our lows. And I would say for you to please take some time, because just like seasons, our minds and our bodies go through seasons. And our bodies are constantly changing, and our ideas are constantly changing, because that's what growth is. And it's not always pleasant. If you want to make muscle, you got to break the muscle to make more muscle. So change isn't a bad thing. Change is a necessary experience for you to grow. And growing sometimes involves rest. So it's okay. It's okay no matter if you're Superman, Superwoman, whatever you do, give yourself time to rest. Give yourself time to listen to yourself intuitively. And I don't mean the critical side of you that's like, get up, you're lazy, or that you're not doing enough, or you're not successful, but not that voice, but the voice that comes from the stomach, from the gut. And if the gut isn't telling you anything, it's because you need to look, you need to explore about how to take care of that gut through nutrition. So before you think you're crazy or you think something is wrong, maybe check what you're eating, what you're listening to, if you're taking any supplements that are not supplements, but pharmaceutical things that might be affecting your mood, might be affecting your brain and how it's processing things. There's so much to say about what we're putting into our bodies that's actually doing us no favors. And I'm not a nutritionist, but I would say to you that it just take the time. And if you take the time and you connect to what you see, like with nature, you'll realize that you have the ability to physician heal thyself. We all have it within us. So
yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your own story, sharing your insights, and being a guest on my show today.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Speak with you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening or watching my podcast, Holistic Creators. If you want to know more about how I can help and support you, have a look at my website, spiritualchangemaker.com. You can also join my Facebook group, Spiritual Changemakers Community. Stay tuned for the next episode by subscribing to this channel. And you also can check the previous episodes.